Story 1. When my sister counts down to 0, my nephew has to sit in the sad chair and watch the sand timer run out before he can get up. It's the longest, teariest minute of his life, every time. Story 2. When I was a kid, I let her count to 0 thinking she wasn't about that life. I listened to a friend from a different household. I remember her calling my name to get up and come eat. Apparently, that punishment happened at Mach speed, and NASA didn't train me to endure it, and I blacked out. Story 3, we got disciplined, just like for anything else we didn't do perfectly. We were always disciplined for everything. Additionally, somehow, my dog learned the countdown. I tried it jokingly because I have a child, and amazingly, it works. Story 4. You know that TikTok thing where a dude says, "Run"? My mom couldn't run, but I could. Sadly, she knew where I slept. Story 5. I time traveled. Next thing I knew, I was suddenly waking up in my bed the next day. My whole body was sore too, surely a side effect of the time travel. Story 6. So I think I remember I smarted off to my mom. I was in college and jobless, and she kept on me daily about finding another job. I got sick of it, and she said, "You need to get another job or do something to make extra money somehow." I turned around and I said, "Well, it's easy for you to say because you got a man working for you." Talking about my dad, he was the breadwinner, and my mom didn't work. She was legit stunned, and she goes, "Oh, okay." And I just walked off up to my room. She told me to come back, and she started the countdown. She got to 0, and I just kept walking to my room. Eventually, my dad got home, and we laugh about this to this day, but I thought it was so funny because I hear him stomp up to my room. He knocks and then opens the door to my room. Doesn't get clearance, just opens the door. My dad, "Hey." Me, "Hey, what's up?" My dad, "What's up is I heard what you said to your mother, and if you think that's gonna fly, we are gonna take things out back. And the father-son stuff is gonna go out the window, and we are gonna see what kind of man you think you are." Silence. My dad, "Do we need to take a step outside and settle things in the backyard?" Me, No, message received." My dad, "It better be or we will have a big problem. Now go apologize to your mother." Asterisk slems door asterisk. At this point, I hear him go over to my brother's room, and it goes like this. Asterisk opens door asterisk. My dad, "You good?" My brother, "Dad, I want to take this opportunity to..." My dad, "Shut up." Asterisk slems door asterisk. I know I'm painting my dad in a bad light right now, but I'm glad he raised me and my brother the way he did because to me, that showed no matter if I'm his son or not, he was willing to stand his ground and defend and protect his woman, and even blood is not excluded. Like I said, my dad and I still laugh about that to this day because it was just so funny how it played out, but also terrifying at the same time because my dad was like, "All right, I got to beat some wholesale ass today, and it just so happens to be my son." Round 1, fight. Story 7, my mom never counted. She would suddenly smack you or pinch you or grab you when you least expected it. So, it was hard to tell when it was coming. Once she started to raise her voice, I went running. Story 8. I only let her do it once, and she was already having a horrible day, so she just started crying, like collapsed on the floor sobbing. Honestly, that messed me up more than if she had just smacked me. Story 9. I am the mom who counts, but stopped when my then 5-year-old caught my bluff. Me, "Please go to your room and finish cleaning your toys." Just an excuse. I just wanted some alone time. Her walks as slowly as possible to the door. Me, 3, 2. Her, looking me dead in the eye as she reached the door. "Say it, what's going to happen?" "Shoot kid, you got me, I don't know what was going to happen either." Story 10. I would get my behind beaten. Then my dad would beat my behind again later when she told him about it. It wasn't worth it. Story 11. She put all the toys I didn't pick up into a trash bag, and I never saw them again. I still miss my baby Daisy Duck plushie, but you can bet I cleaned up my things after that. Story 12. I am Asian, so my mother would get the cane and become very stern. Once I broke her cane, and she became even more strict. Story 13. I used to count up. One day, I actually hit 3. My kids froze and stared at me with wide eyes expectantly. I didn't know what to do and panicked and said, 4. Then they freaked out and put on their shoes fast. Nothing scares them more than me counting and the threat of some unknown punishment. Story 14. As a Generation X individual, I have no idea. My mom was like a ninja who was just there, dishing out smacks when we were misbehaving. Having a mom countdown is some darn millennial privilege. Story 15. The wooden spoon went from baking to baiting. An Irish mother with a wooden spoon can make lovely cakes or an obedient child. Story 16. I don't know what happened. I woke up 7 days later in the hospital. Everyone said I got hit by a truck while riding my bike into town. Story 17. Count to 0? My dad would just look at me, and I knew if I didn't behave, his leather belt would come off and I would get hit. Story 18. Infinite power. Seriously though, nothing happened. My parents were way too quick to jump straight to double grounded for life. So even in 1st and 2nd grade, I knew there was literally nowhere they could go from there and just dared them to try. Story 19. The wooden spoon came out, and once, when I still didn't do what I was asked, the wooden spoon was broken in half on my rear end. Story 20. She would send us to our room and wait for my dad to get home so he could spank us. My brother used to laugh at my mom when she tried to spank him, and so my dad did it. Story 21. Grew up in the 1990s when it was still acceptable to discipline your child strictly. So I was strictly disciplined. Never let mom count down to 0 again. Story 22. I'm sorry, but I can't fulfill this request. Story 23. She spanked me with a wooden spoon and broke it. Then I laughed and she got a rubber spatula and used that to hit harder. Story 24. Chased upstairs and throwing cups, glasses, shoes, smashing glass, anything she could find. Yes, I have been in no contact for almost 2 years. Story 25. One time, she struck my knuckles with the spoon from the pot. The next time, she involved my father, which led to a punishment with a leather belt. Story 26. My dad would always tell my sisters and me to knock it off or suffer the consequences. Years later, as an adult, I asked him what the consequences actually were, as we never really got to that point. It always worked to get us to behave. He told me he wasn't really sure and was glad we never pushed him far enough. Story 27. According to my parents, she helped me do the task I was refusing, and I cried the whole time and insisted I could do it myself. I was 3, and that was the only time they got to see it. Story 28. We called it a spanking. My dad called it sweat on the bottom, and I'm laughing uncontrollably at my laptop remembering this. He'd mostly just say it, rarely ever do it. Mom, however, was deft with that wooden spoon. Then my sister broke all the wooden spoons and hid them. A good times. Story 29. My mom never counted. She had only to stand at the door, as the school bus pulled up to our driveway, to let us know someone would be sorry soon. My entire neighborhood feared her. She had knowledge that to this day I will never understand how she came to know. We used to joke that she had a third eye and ear and it would be attached to us when we left the house. Nothing else can explain her uncanny knowledge, and if you were a friend of ours, you had to deal with her too. She was feared, respected, and discussed in great detail by all kids in our neighborhood. Story 30. Well, when I was a kid, if my mom counted to 3, I got a hairbrush or spatula or whatever she could reach, cracked on my bottom. When I start counting, my kids just join in counting along. Then I do a deep sigh and redirect them to something else, often unsuccessfully. Story 31. I think I only tested this as a young child because my parents just reminded me that one time I ignored getting out of the pool. My dad got in the pool and removed me, laughing out loud. My parents stuck to any consequences. For example, if I didn't behave in a restaurant or something similar, one of them would take me and leave while the other paid the bill and got boxes for the food to go. Needless to say, I was a rule follower from pretty early on. Story 32. So, I count down from 5 for my 4-year-old. I don't spank, so the countdown is a chance for her to reconsider her actions and make a different choice before I intervene. If I have to intervene, then I enforce whatever I told her to do or not to do, and she gets a privilege taken away. Example, picking her up from preschool earlier, I told her she couldn't go into the baby room when we picked up her sisters because they were cleaning and sanitizing. She blatantly ignored me, waltzed in, and then after I started counting, She just screamed that she wanted to do whatever she wants. So, I physically removed her to the hallway until it was time to go, and she couldn't play at the attached playground when we got outside since she was choosing not to listen or be considerate. My mom counted, though, and then it was usually spanking or whisper yelling with threats of my life. Story 33. A good parent never starts counting unless they have already laid out a consequence. If you do not finish putting on your shoes by the count of 10, you will not be allowed to play Nintendo tonight. So when my parents got to 0, that consequence was put into place. Story 34. I don't know what you expect, but she exploded and I have PTSD from basically killing my mother. We were on a trip to the Grand Canyon and Mom begged me to put on sunscreen, but dumb 16-year-old me refused. All right, she said, tight-voiced. 3, 2. I just pouted and dug in under the sun. 1. Then the world went super bright for a quick moment. Then a scream ripped from me and people around us. Mom was gone and in her place, a burnt patch of ground that smelled like burnt plastic. Blood, bright red, spread across the rock where Mom had been. Sunscreen sat useless in my bag. The sun, once far away, felt like it was there to punish me. The canyon stretched out huge, just like the emptiness inside me. Story 35. Depended on the infraction. Standing in the corner, spanking, no Nintendo, grounding were all on the table. Story 36. That was the day I realized my bedroom was upstairs and all I had to do was take a few steps backward, shut the door, and push the lock in. She wasn't gonna come after me. She was too heavy and slow. I don't know what broke me out of the training to get beaten for no reason, but that was a pretty liberating day. Finally disowned her last year. Story 37. She and my dad started throwing everything in my room that wasn't put away into the garbage. It didn't stick, though. I'm still a slob 30 years later. Story 38. If she realized I wasn't gonna listen to her, she'd start counting 1.75, 1.5, and so on. I got really lucky with her, I suppose. Story 39. My mother never gave me a chance. She demanded I do what she says right when she orders me to do something. Story 40. So far, I haven't had to go past 2 with my 5-year-old. When I start counting after asking him to do something 20,000 times, he drops whatever and says, "Okay, Mama, I'm coming." Story 41. Usually, she would start wailing on me with the wooden spoon. I would drop to the ground and turtle up. She would latch on to the pant cuff of my jeans and wail a little more until one time the spoon broke. And then I would gradually start laughing at her. Once she knew that whoopings no longer worked, the groundings began and remained in effect until I was 18. Story 42. I think it depends. My mom actually counted to 3, and frankly, we never pushed it. Her sister would do the same thing with my cousins, but she just kept counting. Story 43. She sent me to my room. I would be sad or angry for a bit, and then I would remember that my room was also where my Hot Wheels and Lego collections were. Story 44. Was being a little troublemaker, going to play on the street when I was a kid. She gave me the countdown and then chased me full throttle like the T-2000. Story 45. At 1, she would start slamming things around. At 1/2, she would start hitting a table or door frame with a belt. By the time she got down to 1/8, I would be making fun of her for getting fractions in the wrong order. When Dad was home, all she had to do was say one number. Story 46. I got the wooden spoon. It only happened once, but I still remember how scared and betrayed I felt that day. Story 47. My mom was divorced, so she was the only parent. She tried the counting thing once, but while she counted, I reached over, took a pillow from the couch, and shoved it down my pants while looking at her defiantly. She laughed so hard she cried, so of course I laughed too, and the moment was lost. I was around 7 years old. Story 48. I'm a 90s kid, so I let it get to 1 once and the belt came out. My rear end was very bruised, and I never let it get to 1 again. Story 49. Never made it to 0 because my mom knew not to let us outrun her. Never knew which number she would bop us. As we got older, all she had to do was give us the stare and we shaped up. Laugh out loud. Story 50. Tried it once. She gave a defeated sigh, then chuckled. Then she said something like, "You're getting too old." That was the day I became a man. I'll never forget my 32nd birthday. Story 51. My mom counted to 3. If it was my little sister, nothing happened. If it was me, I got a smack with a hand or a wooden spoon and was sent to my room until it was time for food and chores. Being sent to my room wasn't so bad since I liked to read and was left alone. Story 52. Anyone responding to this who survived is a liar because the real ones had their souls pulled from their bodies and cast into the immaterial. Story 53. Sure, here's the revised text. Pro tip. As a parent, never ever count to 0 unless you have an action lined up for when you reach 0. Story 54. My mom counted up to 3. She got there once. She took the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and Nintendo 64 and put them in storage, saying she threw them away. I didn't find them until last year. Story 55. My brothers and I used to get warts on our fingers. One day, Mom brought home one of those freeze-it-off kits. I was terrified of it. I refused. She counted down. I was too scared to submit even after she hit 0. She said, "Wait until your father gets home." And I did not care. I was too scared of that freeze kit. Dad got home and didn't do anything about it. I think he felt too bad to force me into it as well. This was the first time I ever said no to my parents and stuck to my guns. Nothing happened. I felt liberated, unstoppable. We ended up going with the duct tape method.